hands down through the decades with Sir Patrick Moore.
Good evening. This is a very special program, and I'm here to invite you to a birthday party, the 50th birthday of the Sky at Night program. We went on the air on April 24th, 1957. We haven't missed a month since, which is quite a record. And I must say, we have a large marquee in the garden of my home, and I'm absolutely staggered by the huge number of eminent astronomers, professional and amateur, who have come down here to help us celebrate this birthday party. So in this program, we look back at some of the episodes of the 654 editions of the Sky at Night. And believe me, there have been some very interesting episodes.
Hello to the first ever Sky at Night from Stonehenge. The excitement is mounting all the time as sunrise approaches.
Here I am in a lift going 3/4 of a mile underground in Booby Mine toward this strange observatory.
Well, Michael, we used a frisbee, obviously, because it is aerodynamically shaped. And when these things were first reported, they were always known as flying saucers. I'm not quite sure when they changed over to UFO, but a flying saucer it could be.
This birthday party is also in its way a star party. And quite a number of our visiting astronomers have brought along their telescopes. And of course, in my garden, I have my own observatory. So let's go there and join Chris Lintott.
This is the observatory housing Patrick's 15-inch telescope. He got it back in 1956, and it, and the work done with it, has featured on the programme ever since. Despite the unpromising sky, the amateurs are trusting in Selsey's usually excellent conditions and hoping for a break in the clouds. Astronomy is really the only science where amateurs can and do make a vital contribution.
In British astronomy has been about the amateurs, because in this country, of course, governments traditionally have never paid for it, but have always let the members of the public do it themselves. Amateur astronomy in this country of a serious research level, all the major discoveries before the 20th century were done by amateurs. And what amazes me is the speed with which Patrick captured the native imagination. People in the early 60s, for instance, when I was a boy, were fascinated by him. My old geography teacher, Mr. Phillip, could do spectacular imitations of him. Monocle, jacket off shoulder, hair ruffled up. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I was absolutely spectacular. And he caught the nation.
This is what we call an alt-azimuth mounting, and you can see you can swing it round anywhere, and it is very convenient from that point of view.
And that, I think, captures what Patrick Moore is all about and why he's a unique figure in not only British astronomy, but in the communication of big, complex subjects to lay audiences.
For me, Patrick and the Sky at Night have been an important part of the space age in this country. I think the contribution that is made by taking it to the people, which Patrick has a natural gift for, and Sky at Night did for everybody.
If you ask the astronomers in this room, we all grew up watching the Sky at Night, watching Patrick, listening to his explanations of the solar system, of the moon, of astronomy in general. Who couldn't be enthused by such an upbringing?
All these people, you know, coming from so many walks of life, have been inspired by Patrick. That's the most amazing thing. I mean, it's not just astronomers, it's rock stars, it's kids, it's everybody. And just looking up at the heavens now in this tent, how they've inspired our visions of space.
I remember the time, you certainly won't, when space was regarded as entirely empty. And I'm always amazed now at the numbers of molecules that have been found, the various types, organic molecules, formaldehyde, and now, of course, alcohol.
We could do with some of that at the moment.
You know, it's interesting to recall that the Sky at Night is older than the space age. We began in April 1957, and the first Sputnik didn't go up until the following October.
Well, I expect you'll realize straight away who this is. Major Yuri Gagarin, just about to report mission accomplished to Mr. Khrushchev. You know, if I'd come on the air in 1957, when we did the first of these Sky at Night programs, and said that within 5 years I'd be showing you pictures of the first man to go round the Earth in orbit in a spaceship, well, I think you'd have regarded me as mad. But nevertheless, it has happened. And the great question now is, what is going to happen next?
Go, roll! Look, I would roll on this slope, why don't you? On the rock.
The peak of the space race was, of course, the Apollo missions. It's more than 30 years now since man stepped onto the moon, but that's still a source of inspiration for today's astronauts, like Britain's own Piers Sellers.
I was a kid back then when all that happened, and I was glued to my black and white TV set watching the first lunar landing and everything that led up for it. It was one, I saw you. I was an avid fan. It was remarkable to have gone from the first object in space to a man on the moon in 12 years.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Right at the very beginning they had a huge setback with a fire on the pad that killed the first crew, but they recovered from that, and within just over a year had managed to get the first Apollo 7 in orbit, tested it out, got all the bugs out of it. And then the second flight of an Apollo, incredibly bold, they launched on a Saturn V, which is the first manned flight of the Saturn V. Off they go to the moon, circumlunar. You remember that at Christmas 1968 when Apollo 8 went around the moon.
Whereabouts would they be now, roughly?
Now, they're coming over here, you see. Here's the crater Condorcet. There's the Sea of Crises, the Mare Crisis. And this is a very well-known one from Earth. And there is the Mare Smythii, Sea of Smythe Sea. And they're going to point down in this direction. So this is the area that we've been seeing.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
And then Apollo 11 with the first landing on the moon.
Of course, well, you know better than I do, it was a tremendous risking to do.
Very much so. And reading the history now, you realize how close it was.
1,400 feet, still looking very good.
He was landing and everything was going well, and suddenly they found out they were going to land in the middle of a huge boulder field, and almost certainly destroyed the lander. So he took manual control and jittered over the top, looking for a landing site, and the fuel's counting down. Still no decent landing site. Fuel's running out, lights are coming on. Eventually put it down with probably about just over between 10 and 16 seconds of fuel left.
Houston, the Eagle has landed.
I was watching it on television. I did not know that until Neil Armstrong came and told us about it to our new astronaut class. It was fascinating to hear it from the man.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Piers, it'd been a tremendous pleasure to have you, and a great honour, and congratulations on all you've done.
Thank you, Patrick.
New man completed his first exploration of the moon. May the spirit of peace in which we came be reflected in the lives of all mankind. 99, proceeded, 3, 2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston.
I have the Sky at Night to thank for making me an astronomer. We used to watch it in school. And I think the thing is that Patrick's never been afraid to explain complicated ideas in a fun way. And I remember one program that embodied that idea. It was called Galactic Dustbins.
I've got here a pair of objects, a dustbin and a bag of rubbish.
Yes.
If I were to shoot this towards a black hole, a rotating black hole, and allow the rubbish to fall into the black hole, this will come whizzing out with lots of extra energy.
Yes.
Since we began these Sky at Night programs of ours way back in 1957, we've had more requests than I can count to talk about relativity, and in any case it's something we've wanted to do for a very long time, and now for this evening we are going to tackle it.
Suppose we imagine two-dimensional people like this little circle. The people have no idea of what three dimensions are. They are flatlanders. And let's imagine this is the world on which the flatlanders can move. This is spherical, but they don't understand the meaning of three dimensions. It's a flatland as far as they're concerned. Now, suppose we introduce a dimple into this. When this little person's moving across there, when he comes to the dimple, he suddenly drops in and whips out. And he says, hello, I've experienced a force. I've dropped in and I've come out. I've experienced a force. But I say in my wisdom, oh no, you haven't experienced a force at all. You have come across a distortion in geometry. You think it's a force. I, in my wisdom, know that you've merely had a change in geometry and you interpret that as a force. In like manner, when we talk about gravitational forces, the four-dimensional super being stands out and says, oh, no, no, not at all. Really, matter has introduced a distortion in space. I think that this is a force. It's really only a distortion in space.
And indeed, Patrick, I'm just getting the feeling that I can feel the force.
Yes, so can I. Indeed I do.
Heavy objects distort space and time, as demonstrated by Astronomer Royal for Scotland and magician Professor John Brown.
Well, the Royal Society, I was trying to demonstrate what happens with a black hole in the way of gravity, and Carlos very kindly helped me there. So if I could possibly borrow a 5p piece, I'm going to see if I can. It's very dangerous lending 5p piece to a Scotsman.
It's the Astronomer Royal for Scotland.
Ah, well, that's even worse, actually.
That is even worse.
Yeah, that's funding now.
So what we're going to do is we're going to get a smaller sheet. This is space-time this time.
So this is our model of space.
So this is the other side of the universe, if you like.
Okay.
Space-time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the rubber around the edges so there's no sneaky thing. Space-time is completely closed. Carlos is going to put his finger gently on there.
And we're going to increase the mass of the object.
Mass and see what happens with a black hole as space becomes increasingly curved.
So it's getting more massive.
Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Whoa!
How do you do this? There's no holes in this. It's a rupture of space-time.
Delighted you're here, and even more delighted because you have a surprise for Patrick.
Yes, we have a nice surprise. The IAU decided to honour the programme Sky at Night for 50 years worth by naming an asteroid after him with a very special number, named after the date of the first programme, which is 57424.
So asteroid number
57424 has been named Caelum Noctum, which, if the Latin is up to it, means, sky at night.
Patrick Moore's telescope, the actual one that he views the moon from, that's pretty spectacular. Everybody that's standing around the telescope, these gentlemen, they're all like 7-year-olds. It's a bit of a dream for them all, so that's quite nice to see everyone just going, wow.
Of course, we've also had the unexpected things like Comet Hale-Bopp of 97.
Oh, yeah, that was
which
a fine comet.
Is Patrick's 40th anniversary present.
Our 40th anniversary programme last month was graced by a bright comet, Hale-Bopp. But 40 years ago, in April 1957, our very first Sky at Night programme was also greeted by a bright comet, Anniversaries, the famous spiked comet. It was a bright, naked-eye object, and which I may say will never return. It's been thrown out of the solar system permanently.
He seems to have had a following wind. I think in anything you need a bit of luck with you, and Patrick certainly had that with all the things going on. There's always something happening in the sky, and that's the nice thing about the Sky at Night, that you can always focus on what's just happening or tell people about things to go out and look for.
Oh dear. Well, as you can see, the sky is totally obscured. We haven't been lucky, but I have seen some amazing things from this garden in the past. I'll never forget, back in 2004, watching the transit of Venus. Tell us about this telescope. Am I allowed to call it the low-tech way of looking at things?
You can if you like, yes, it won't mind. This is my childhood instrument, really. It's a Newtonian reflector which me and my dad made out of a kit, and it's cost almost nothing, but it does work, as you can see.
It's a beautifully sharp image, actually. I like the coat hanger attachment. I think that's.
I was very pleased with that. That was a last-minute modification. I think it was invented by Messrs. Heath and Robinson.
What are you aiming to do, John?
Well, we're going to photograph the sky from.
For some celestial events, such as eclipses, the Sky at Night had no choice but to take to sea. Plucky astronomers came up with some interesting devices to counteract the sway of the ship.
Horace, I gather you'll get a handhold.
Yes, I'm intending to do it that way because I believe you can hold it just as steadily that way on a heaving deck as you can on a tripod.
And there's the corona, and there's a brilliant prominence to the side of the sun. This is incredible, the best corona I think I've ever seen in my life.
And it's back to the high seas for an eclipse, this time in 1998. Once again, weather conditions were perfect.
The diamond ring. And totality is upon us. Wow! One lovely red prominence, almost at the top of the sun, has been from here.
So with such a good track record behind the sky at night, we were all looking forward to the eclipse in Cornwall in 1999. Oh dear.
The day before the eclipse was a most stunningly sunny day, and we selected where we were going to be filmed, and I remember well, it was a bench right on the edge of a precipice which was rocky, and when we all sat on it, it rocked to and fro, and we propped it up on a log. So the health and safety at the BBC would have had heart attacks if they'd known what was going on. And then on the day of the eclipse, it absolutely hammered down with rain most of the day. I think the cameraman got one slight shot of partiality. And then I think most of the rest of the programme we sat under umbrellas muttering.
We did.
And we never saw a thing.
And they did think they recorded quite what we were muttering.
They didn't record what we were muttering, but what we did see, and I shall never forget, is at the moment of totality about 3 million flashlights went off in Falmouth, which is probably brighter than the solar corona. It was absolutely hilarious.
Just as in Cornwall, the unpredictable British weather has scuppered us tonight. But we're rising above that and linking to La Palma in the Canary Islands, one of the world's best observing sites. Well, Mike, welcome back. Once again, we're fighting Selsey cloud.
Yes.
But, we have a way round this with your project, the Liverpool Telescope.
Yes, we do.
Remind us what the Liverpool Telescope is.
Yeah, it's the world's largest robotic telescope, and most of the time is devoted to research projects, about 95% of the time, but 5% is for schools in the UK. And they can actually request observations on this professional national facility telescope.
What sort of things are we likely to see?
Well, you'll see details of the craters and also the lunar seas, the marquee, which obviously aren't seas at all. It's odd for a professional astronomer to use a large telescope to look at the moon, but actually for the schools what we're doing is things like the mosaic, which is making a mosaic picture of the moon.
Our next live link up is to SALT, the South Africa Large Telescope. With its revolutionary design, it promises a brand new look at the southern skies.
This is the first time we've linked up with South Africa. And we're delighted to have the director with us, Professor Phil Charles. Phil, welcome back to the Sky at Night.
Fantastic to be here this evening on such a wonderful occasion.
Well, let's go over now, can we, to South Africa. Can you hear us?
Yes, this is David Buckley here in Salt.
What are we seeing now, the control room?
Wave to us, David.
Ah, there we are.
So just greetings from South Africa.
So what are the plans for tonight, David?
Well, tonight is basically an engineering night. One of the engineers has been actually riding up on the tracker of the telescope and conducting some visual tests with an eyepiece, which I think is quite unique for a telescope of this size, for someone actually to be looking through it by eye.
It's been great to link up with you, and I know astronomers all over the world will wish you and SALT the very best of success.
The Sky at Night will no doubt soon be talking about the results from SALT, but tonight, the gossip at the party involves breaking news, a new planet beyond our solar system.
It's in the habitable zone. Tonight they're announcing that the Harps team in Geneva have discovered a 5 Earth mass planet orbiting a red dwarf only 20 light years away from the Earth and orbiting within that star's habitable zone. That means that the liquid water could be present on the surface of this star.
And of course 5 Earth masses, 5 times the mass of the Earth, is about that crucial region where this could be a rocky planet.
Yes, if it really is a 5 Earth mass planet, and you have to remember this is a minimum mass, but if it is, then it will be rocky, it can't be gaseous.
So this might be the first rocky planet in a habitable zone.
Exactly, that's what they are announcing, and it seems very plausible.
Ron, let's begin our tour between the planets.
Right, on this occasion then, I'll be Voyager 1.
Coming back to our own solar system, Ron Madison is one of the long-standing stalwarts of the programme. As you might imagine, he has a few tales to tell.
Well, what sticks in my mind is when we nearly lost you on a mountain in Tenerife.
Oh, yes.
We'd gone to talk about Mount Olympus on Mars, and we were standing on the edge of the great big Teide caldera. And you were wearing a straw hat. And during reverse questions, there was a gust of wind, and this hat blew off. And you went after it. And we thought you'd forgotten you were on the edge of a steep cliff, but you caught it and came back and carried on as if nothing had happened.
Sorry. Blast and hell.
Well, we nearly lost me, but we nearly lost you once. We shrank you, do you remember?
Oh, I do. We were talking about the scale of the solar system, weren't we?
Yes, we were.
Well, Ron, what does it feel like to be only 1/100th my size?
Well, I must say it's a bit of a surprise. We should hold still, and this is a strict representation of what it's like. The size of the Earth compared with the Sun, 100 to 1.
I remember that very well.
I remember one thing, you threatened me.
You're a tiny little figure now, just compared with one of with my thumb, for example.
You dare.
The Scarlet Nights that really, I think, gel with me the most are where Patrick's in his garden with his telescopes, and we're seeing his 15-inch reflector, 5-inch refractor, 12.5-inch telescopes that he actually used to look at objects and make great observations himself.
And it's from this dome, with this telescope, that I've spent a lot of time in the last few months looking at the planet Mars.
You had the hairstyle, which I always admired, and then the gleaming eye, and that air of intensity, as if God asked permission from Patrick Moore to run the universe.
Right, one balloon, compressed gas inside. When I let go the exhaust, the gas will rush out, the balloon will kick against itself, and it's going to fly with any luck. Right, Michael, stand by for a rocket launch. Well, it went up all right. Rather erratic course, possibly, but after all, some of the liquid fuel rockets of the 1930s did behave rather like them.
The only ones I saw were at the end of the war, the V2s, which we'd captured, and I went down to Houston to see some fired, and 3 or 4 of them blew up. We had a saying, it says, "We know that what goes up must come down, but why so soon?"
When we began the Sky at Night program, we thought there were oceans on Venus, vegetation on Mars, and so on. Well, how wrong we were.
We've just had some amazing photographs sent back by the American probe to Mars, Mariner 6. Mariner 7, by the way, has been brought back under control, and we await news from that. But meanwhile, we have this superb series of close-ups from Mariner 6 from a distance of more than 700,000 miles.
Well, we were very lucky in our time together. We've been from every planet from Mercury right the way out to Neptune, but the Voyagers were certainly very special. And of course, at every encounter, the two at Jupiter, the two at Saturn, then Uranus and Neptune, we had a chance to bring history to the front rooms of everybody.
I remember one of these programs, we were over actually at the Cape. I went down with the flu or something, and you absolutely rescued the situation.
Well, I guess I can safely say I must be one of the few people in the world that silenced Patrick Moore, because for 10 days when we recorded the daily updates for the Voyager mission to Uranus, you were unfortunately unwell, unable to say anything. Peter Moore-Purgo was producing at the time, asked the questions, you open and shut your mouth. I have well-educated goldfish, and I just performed as per normal. But it was a fantastic program. When we came back, you added your part, and to everybody else, it looked quite natural and normal.
Until then, from here, at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, good night.
And this was actually the first American space station. See that? That's a big solar panel.
In the Sky at Night, particularly I think in the early days, we made extensive use of models, neither difficult to design and difficult to make. Many of them were made, especially of course, by Matt Irvine. And earlier on, I caught up with him and he showed us some of those models. You know, Matt, looking at these models take me back many, many years, all through the Sky at Night, almost from the start. For example, Sputnik 1, our very early programs.
Well, of course, that's as old as the program, Patrick, that one is, isn't it? Soviet surprised everybody.
I did indeed. Well, of course, some of the probes that you modelled here no longer exist or won't be seen again, but the Viking lander will. It's standing there happily upon Mars.
I made them for you specially for the program that was just before the first Viking 1 landing. Didn't know what the surface was going to be like. Could it be very, very dusty and the thing would just disappear, or could it be hard and it would just bounce or break something, or could it be, the interesting one was like a meringue surface?
So let's begin by seeing what would happen if Viking came down in a permafrost area.
you can see what would happen. It would certainly put the spacecraft completely out of action.
You had Jeff Eglinton and Gary Hunt on, and you had one each. I can't remember who did what, but you had one each and you dropped them. I think Egg at one point said something, if you drop them from this height, they break.
They did, indeed. And, of course, Voyager. And we used that model many, many times.
These Voyagers are amazing craft. Here's one of Matt Irvine's lovely models. There is the scan platform carrying the cameras and many of the important instruments, the only thing which on Voyager 2 did give a certain amount of trouble.
I think that one holds the record because Voyager was, the first encounter was about 79 or 80, wasn't it? And because the last one, Voyager 2 and Neptune, was 89. So we're probably talking about a decade overall.
There's memories here, memories right back 50 years to 1957. And without your models, we would have lost a great deal. So, Matt, thank you indeed for your great skill and generosity in making all these for us.
Back at the party, it's time for Patrick's Guide to the Moon.
Okay, Patrick, now we're going to talk about a subject very warm to your heart, the moon. And this is warm to my heart too, because one of the gentlemen who works down at the end of my corridor in Houston is John Young, who casually drops in conversation that he's been there twice. Once to go around and the other time to sit on it and drive around and take rock samples and all the rest of it.
And you don't think it's hard for a one-eyed guy to find something like this when it's running around the cockpit? You're not with it.
And Peter Cannibal, who's with us here, is going to walk us through with you and compete with you on naming the craters as we go through.
That's not fair.
Well, there, the Hadleyville area. You see them there. Peter, any comments there?
What a wonderful picture.
Look at this one there, the Hyginus cleft on the top of the picture. Part cleft, part crater chain.
Part crater chain and on a lava plain, of course. These are some of the most fluid, widespread lavas in the whole of the solar system, and we learned an awful lot, of course, when the spacecraft went there and astronauts walked all over it, even on Mars, not surpassed. Yes, and the highlands of the moon, again flooded with volcanic material. That crater at the bottom, whose name I can't give you at this stage of the party evening. You've still got a better memory than I have at 84.
Wilhelm Humboldt, a crater very near the moon's edge, and therefore very foreshortened, with a lovely riddle system on the floor.
I'm speechless.
Of course, all good birthday parties have a cake, and the Sky at Night cake has 50 candles. The British Astronomical Association have made us a birthday card. The idea came from one of their younger members, Pip Jennings.
Yep, this is from the BAA. It's 268, I think it is.
Thank you so much, Pip, for coming along and giving me this. After all, it's people like you who will take over from me. This is a wonderful tribute. I joined the BAA in 1934, rather a long time ago now, and this is a wonderful tribute. So for all the members there, thank you indeed, and Pip, thank you for coming along. See you. Marvellous.
You managed to cut your throat there, Patrick.
I'm sorry about that. Well, somebody else will one day, I've no doubt. Well, this has been a great moment for me, our 50th anniversary Sky at Night birthday party. It's been a great time, and I like to think the Sky at Night has played a small part in the early days of the space program. So, until next month, from the marquee in my garden at Selsey, good night.
The aliens are coming, and next on BBC One with an invasion of the body snatchers.